So in today's web dev tip, we're going to take a look at classes in TypeScript and how you can use them to create your own objects and some of the differences between ES6 classes and the things to look out for when using TypeScript. So let's create a simple class, and then I'll explain some of the differences between ES6 classes and how you can create properties and methods within your classes. So we simply use the class keyword in TypeScript to create a new class, and we could create something for a user perhaps, and so we just give it the name of the class that we want to create, and then it's just simply a case of opening and closing some curly braces, and that's pretty much all we need to do to create a class. So the first thing is, with an ES6 class, you would normally need to create your properties within your object that the class will create inside of a constructor. So if you want this class to have some properties when an object is created from it, within TypeScript what we can do is just define those within the curly braces of the class. So that would look something like this. So let's say we'd give the person a name, and again, because we're using TypeScript, we can give the name property a particular value, a particular type. And in the previous examples, they also had an age, which was a number, and also an option in there as well for is pro dev, which was a boolean. And so we can create those properties for the object that the class will create directly inside of those curly braces. And obviously when you create a new object from this class, you would need to assign some values to these properties, and there are a couple of different ways of doing that, but it would typically be done within a constructor, and we'll look at that in another web dev tip. So to create the rest of the class, we might have some functions within our particular user class that we're creating. So they might have something like login, for example, and if we want to create a method on the class, which is just a function on the object that's created, we simply give the function a name, the method a name, and then use the parentheses to open and close the function itself. And of course, if there are any arguments inside of here, we might put them inside of the definition for the function here. So that's pretty much it for creating a basic class. So our user class is a blueprint for a user object, and we've got name, age, and is pro dev as the properties, and one function which doesn't do anything, which is login. So how do you actually create a new object from this class? Well, you're probably familiar with this from JavaScript already, but I'll just run through how you would do it in TypeScript. So we want to create a new user object from our class, and let's just say it's a new constant variable called user1, and we just assign that the value of the class, but we use the new keyword to create a new user object. So if we were to just log that out to the console, for example, and run the code on the terminal, and you should see the output that this gives. Let's just open it up a little bit so you can see. And you can see that what we've got is basically an empty object, because even though we've got those properties on the class, we haven't actually assigned any values. So as mentioned, we'd probably do this using a constructor, but just to show you how you would do it here, you do have access to all of the properties that are available on the user object. So let's just create a name and an age on those on the user object. So you can see again the types are respected, so we need to make sure that we're using the right data types when we're creating those. And then if we run the code again, you can see we get an object back, and we've got the name and age property set. So there you go, there's just a quick introduction to how you would create a class in TypeScript. As you can see, it's very similar to a JavaScript way of creating a class. The key difference that we've seen today is that you don't need to create your member properties, the name, age, and is pro dev, inside of your constructor. You can actually define those outside of the constructor itself and put them in the class definition at the top level. So in our next web dev tip, we'll take a look at how to use the constructor with a class in TypeScript. So make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.